Our real-world rule of money for this lesson has to do with estate planning. What is estate planning? An estate is basically, put in very simple terms, is everything that we have. But the term estate is typically linked to death, where we have an estate and we do estate planning to protect both from while we're alive the potential lawsuit, or when we pass away, lawsuits during that time, probate during that time, but primarily to make sure that there's a plan in place to direct where whatever it is that we would like to leave, and it goes to the place that we designate. Because here's the thing, if we don't set up a plan, the state has a plan and the government has a plan. And so that is, the basics of estate planning. And so one of the things in estate planning is I've met with people since 2005. One of the things that I've found is I'm not an attorney. I don't give people legal advice, but I can direct them to somebody who could give them legal advice, can give them legal advice, has the licenses and the background, etc., to do so. And so one of the things that I've noticed working with estate planners, or the estate planning firm that I work with, is how lazy estate planning attorneys are. Like really, how genuinely and honestly, a lot, and not all, okay? You might be an attorney watching this and you do a great job, and that's fine, but you've probably experienced the same thing, that the majority of estate planning attorneys are lazy. What they do is they send out an intake form, or they have some sort of intake form. They gather people's information and assets and desires and what they want and blah, blah, blah. And they do the will, they do the trust, or so the client thinks. They gather all the information, they hand it to a paralegal or an assistant or an office admin or some college student that needs something to do. And they have a template. They stick all the information in the template, name, address, phone number, the name of the trust. They maybe get its own social or tax ID number, or it's attached to the social of the person that's doing it. They enter it into this template. They print it in a big, thick binder like this. The attorneys, there must be like attorneybinders.com or something like that, where they get the binder that is like a dark brown or a dark red or dark blue with gold lines on it and a little emblem or whatever that looks fancy. And then they take the printed stuff and they stick it in there. The paralegal does all this. Then the attorney says that they review it, which I always wonder, do they really? Maybe they flip through a few pages right before they go over to deliver it to the client. Or maybe they don't even go over to deliver it to the client. The assistant calls the client, tells them to come down to notarize it and all that, and the attorney's there to help them as it gets notarized, and then they hand them the binder, and that's it. And people are like, well, what's wrong with that? Isn't that how it's supposed to be? Now I have a trust, right? I've got my will, I've got my trust, I've got my estate plan. Well, not necessarily. What if you were to die and you paid $1,800 for an estate plan and it did nothing that you intended it to do? It absolutely must be set up right. And here's the thing. There might be an attorney that says, well, that's, what we all do. Well, here's the thing. Maybe an attorney, a well-intentioned one, or one that's doing it right, explains to them the funding process, which is our real-world rule of money for today. Maybe they explain the funding process, but most of the people that I've met with, I specifically ask them, did your estate planning firm that you worked with, did they explain to you the funding process? And they kind of get this puzzled look. And I say, well, there's a really easy way to know if they explained it or if they did it for you, and that's going to be a law firm that goes the extra mile, which very, 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 very few do. Very few. Is do the funding process. So there's an easy way to find out. Have them grab a bank statement. Well, go get it. They look in their trust, and you ask them, where are all your assets listed? Just to help them find out, do they need to do this process? They open up the trust to the page maybe that shows all the assets and whatever, and then it'll list out, a bank account with, XYZ with Wells Fargo or whoever, and it's all listed out, all the bank accounts that they have, and maybe some insurance policies, and maybe some mutual funds, or maybe some property, or whatever. And so they've got all this stuff listed out. Okay, then have them go get a statement from that bank, a statement from the mutual fund, a statement from the savings plans. Most attorneys will do the title changes as far as property goes. But then when it comes to like the bank accounts and the mutual funds and the insurance and all that stuff, just have them go get a statement. We look at this statement, and here's what happens as our graphic shows. You have a bank account, and you have your estate plan or your trust. The trust, when you read the document, says bank account number 1 at, ABC Bank of America, USA, or whatever it is, right? So in the trust, it says that there's a bank over here that exists, that I have money in. Then we grab the statement of the bank, look at the statement of the bank, and it says that the owner of the bank account is Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Then we call the bank and we say, hey bank, have you ever heard of the Mr. and Mrs. Jones trust, the family living trust? And they look at everything in the bank account, all the documents that have been sent in, sent out, changes, everything, and they're like, no, we have no record of that. And then you call the insurance company and say, hey, according to this trust that I'm looking at, all the proceeds of this trust are of this insurance policy at the time of death of the owner and the insured is to be transferred to this trust. It says right here in the trust. And then the insurance company looks up beneficiaries, owners, changes that have recently been made. You give them the date of the trust, 2018 or whatever. Have any changes been made to the insurance policy since then? They say no. What does that mean? That means that the trust was not funded. That means that the trust knows about the bank, the trust knows about the insurance, but the insurance does not know about the trust, and the bank doesn't know about the trust. So what happens? If the insurance, for life insurance, for example, let's say I have a trust that was not done properly or wasn't funded. The trust itself may have been printed properly how I wanted it, but if I say that all the proceeds from all this stuff is supposed to go into the trust and distributed this way to my kids, etc., but then on my life insurance policy, when I originally got it, before I had the trust, let's say that the beneficiaries listed, well, let's go with my very first life insurance policy I ever got. The beneficiaries were my parents, 50-50, if I died, so that just in case they got divorced. Half would go to my mom, half would go to my dad. Well, contingent beneficiary, if we all died, was my sister. And it was my sister, my older sister, because she was the only one with kids at the time. And as we all do, life gets busy. Things go by, and we don't update things as much as we should. Then I set up my trust, and my trust knows about the policy, has the policy number in there, has the name of the company, has my name, has everything. I die. Where does all the money go? Well, did the life insurance company ever get informed that it was supposed to go to a trust? No. It goes to my mom, 50%, my dad, 50%. Unless we all die at the same time, then it's going to go to my sister. They say, well, what about this trust? What about this trust? Well, the trust doesn't matter. It's just a big stack of papers with ink on it that didn't do what I wanted it to do because I didn't follow through with all the steps. So that's what funding is. It's not enough that the trust knows about the account. The account also has to know about the trust. Whether it's an ownership change on a bank, or a beneficiary change on an insurance policy, or both, or whatever, that is the funding process of a trust, and that's our real-world rule of money for today.